11th edition is finally here. All the rules are out, we got the MFM, and the 40k app has been updated, meaning we can finally get the new edition into full swing. I've just played my first game of 11th edition, so I thought I'd do a quick little recap, kind of talk through what I like about the new edition and my experience with it. With the release of the MFM and the update to the faction pack, Chaos Knights received only a few minor changes. Our previously best Dread ability was changed to just give Knights stealth all of the time, which is a direct nerf. However, all the other abilities have been buffed pretty substantially, since Battle Shocks is now a lot more consistent across the entire game. As for points, the main thing we saw change was the introduction of points costs to war gear, particularly affecting the Knight Despoiler, as well as stepped points cost increases across all of the big knights. If you watch my review of the faction pack, you'll know that this is basically exactly what I wished for. The death of the triple Gatling Despoiler build is something I've wished for forever, and with the stepped points costs, you're now encouraged to take multiple different variants of the large knights instead of just spamming the same three. It might seem like Chaos Knights have received a few nerfs here and there, however, I think we're actually in a pretty decent spot for the start of the new edition. Either that, or I've got some incredibly rose-tinted glasses just glued to my face. The list that I landed on for my first game of 11th was 2 Knight Abominates, 3 Carnivores, 3 Executioners, a Stalker, 3 units of 10 Cultists, and 2 units of 3 Nurglings. The detachments I went with were Traitorous Lance and Iconoclast Fiefdom, playing Take and Hold. Both the Abominates have an enhancement, one has the Veil of Medringard, and one has Nightmare's Master. With the changes to Battle Shock in the new edition, I think Abominates are really good now, and I wanted to see if the Executioners are any better now that AP1 is a lot more impactful. Like the professional that I am, I didn't actually take any pictures of the game that I played, so I basically recreated it using the Rapid Ingress website, and I'm basically just going to talk through kind of what happened. So, turn 1 here, pretty standard deployment. My deployment zone is this red one on the bottom side. My opponent, who is on Custodes, is the blue side up top there. My 2 Abominates here are marked in the yellow circles. My Carnivores are these 3 red ones. The Executioners are the 3 blue ones. My Stalker is this solo yellow circle in the middle. My Cultists are denoted by these long blue rectangles, and my Nurglings over to the right here are the green circles. With the way Terrain and Hidden now works, the idea is basically I want to keep my Cultists on my home objective as far back as I physically can, so that they're getting the maximum value out of Hidden, either 15 inches, or if they aren't able to draw a line of sight past the solid piece of terrain, 12-inch Hidden. My Stalker here is positioned up to scout straight forward towards my opponent, not able to touch the middle objective at the top of turn 1, however stage right behind it and not be able to be shot. I've started both my units of Nurglings in Deep Strikes. My opponent has no infiltrators here, so the idea is I want my Nurglings in Deep Strike, so I can bring them down in my turn 2, and hopefully push out some of his Deep Strikes, which he has quite a lot of. I've also started one of my Carnivores in Strategic Reserves, incredibly good Strategic Reserve threat, Rapid Ingress threat, re-rolling his charges, it's all around really good. It was good in 10th edition, so the idea here is basically to try and see if it's still good in 11th. My Executioners are a little bit more hidden. Now that all vehicles can tow into terrain and shoot through them, I have them in a bit more of a defensive position, but they have the ability to run out and get in a much more aggressive stage position if needed. The Abominant here on the left-hand side is the one with Nightmare's Master, so he is forcing Battle Shock tests at the start of the fight phase to anything he's in combat with, and the one on the right here, out in the open, is the one with the Veil of Medringard, giving him a 4-up invuln against shooting and a 5-up in combat. The idea here is that his Caladius Grav Tank up here can move out turn 1 and shoot my Abominant with the Veil. However, a 4-up invuln against shooting means I'm very likely to not die. I should only take a couple of damage. So we roll off to go first, and my opponent ends up going first. I scout my Stalker here just towards the central objective. Again, like I mentioned, just behind the ruin so he's not able to get shot, but in my turn I can walk him straight on if needed. At the end of my opponent's movement, he has moved his Caladius on the top right out a little bit to be able to see my Knight Abominant. He's moved his unit of bikes up to the right hand side, one of them touching the objective, 2 of them towed into that smaller terrain piece, again so they can see my Knight Abominant. He's dropped 3 Allarus Custodians and with a captain in Allarus Terminator armor down here on the left hand side. He had, I believe, an enhancement to allow him to bring them down within turn 1. So he brings them down here just outside my deployment zone, so he can shoot my unit of Cultists within that terrain piece, as well as take some pot shots on the Stalker a little bit further downfield. This was a rather large commitment, I thought. It's quite an expensive unit to drop down to basically kill off a unit of Cultists and do a handful of damage to my Stalker, and in the end I'm able to punish it quite well. Between the bikes and the Caladius on the right hand side, he shoots my Knight Abominant. It brings it down to, I believe, about 16 wounds remaining. The Caladius whiffed a little bit, only doing a handful of damage. However, the bikes managed to sneak through a d6 plus 1 damage shot and rolled a 6 on the damage, dealing 7 to the Abominant by themselves, which was quite incredible. I was still above half strength, so I didn't have to start testing for Battle Shock or anything like that, but yeah, I was quite surprised to take so much damage turn 1. So, into my turn 1. What ends up happening is on the left-hand side here, I move my Executioner out a little bit so I can see the Terminators that he brought down. I step my Abominant out so that he's able to shoot and charge them and then consolidate back onto the objective. I move the Carnivore right behind him. The idea is not to charge the Allarus with him. He's mostly there just to stage for the upcoming turns. He can threaten the midboard, he can also threaten this left-hand side objective as well. My Stalker has shot up the midboard. He is basically able to get within 15 inches of the Sisters of Silence that are on my opponent's home objective. One of them isn't being obscured by a solid piece of terrain, so the hidden range is 15, which I am able to get within. A Carnivore takes the place of the Stalker behind the central objective, again unable to be shot, staging for a further turn. On the right hand side, I keep my Knight Abominant where he is. I move both my Executioners up to tow into the expansion objective on the right. Both are able to draw a line of sight on the small unit of bikes. I also move the unit of Cultists out so they're able to touch the terrain piece, however are also still screening my backfield. My opponent still has quite a few really scary units. In Strat Reserves, he's able to also uppy downy his Terminator unit, so screening is a big part of this game. My opponent was also playing Take on Hold, so the mission here is essentially Old Linchpin, so holding your home does actually matter, so screening my backfield was something I was very wary of here. Across my turn, through shooting and fighting, I'm able to pick up the Allarus Custodian unit on the left hand side. I'm able to get the Sisters of Silence unit on his home objective down to 1 waddle remaining, which is quite upsetting. I believe I low rolled on some of my shots with the Stalker. Between the Executioners and my Abominant shooting, I kill off one of the bikes and take another one down to 2 wounds remaining. However, I do hold that objective. So, top of turn 2, on the right hand side here, my opponent flies his 2 remaining bikes out to threaten my Executioner that's touching the objective, who moves one of his Dreadnoughts out from behind the terrain to just off the expansion objective on the right. He rolled a 1 on his advance, which was just a handful of millimeters short of the objective. So he command re-rolled it and he rolled another 1. This ended up being a relatively big deal. I believe it cost him 5 points in the end. He had tempting targets, as well as also the primary score that he would have denied me. So it was about a 10-point swing. If he was able to get the Dreadnought on and kill my Executioner using the bikes, and then consolidate the bikes onto the objective, he would have out-OC'd me, denying me quite a lot of points on primary the following turn. As well, like I mentioned, it also would have gotten him his tempting target. His other Dreadnought here near his home objective has moved out behind the terrain to come and try and charge my Stalker. His Caladius Grav Tank on the top left-hand side has also moved out to get some shots on my Knight Abominant that's towing into the left-hand side expansion objective. He's also dropped his 3-man Allarus Terminator unit with no captain directly onto the expansion objective, hoping to make a charge against me basically. Between the Caladius Grav Tank and the Terminators, who do successfully make their charge into my Abominant, he brings him down to about 15 wounds remaining. The Dreadnought in the middle makes the charge into my Stalker and brings him down to 1 wound remaining. And the bikes on the right hand side do 2 or 3 damage to my Executioner. Overall, got away relatively easily this turn. The Caladius Grav Tank here though does finally get some big shots through on my Knight Abominant that's still within my home objective. I'm not able to make enough 4-up invulns. I tried CP rerolling one of them, but I wasn't quite enough. My opponent rolled quite high on the damage, and he was able to take down my Knight Abominant at the top of turn 2. Overall, not in too bad of a position here. Yes, I've lost one of my Abominants, especially my tankier one as he had the enhancement. However, I still feel in a pretty good position. My board control is pretty good. My opponent's unit count is quite low, so losing a big knight isn't the biggest deal in the world. So, into my next turn, a lot kind of goes on here. In the bottom left-hand side, I move my Executioner back behind the ruins to essentially screen out a little bit further in my backfield. I bring some Nurglings down from Deep Strike into my own deployment zone to again screen out the big brick of Terminators. I move my Executioner on the expansion on the right up a little bit to be a little bit more hidden from the Caladius while still on the terrain piece. My Cultists also fully move onto the terrain piece just to get a lot of OC onto the point. I move my Carnivore straight up into the middle objective and charge him into the Dreadnought that's still in combat with my Stalker. I move the Knight Abominant up the left hand side of the table to begin threatening that Caladius and his deployment zone. I bring some more Nurglings down next to the expansion objective just to again further screen out this unit of 6-man Terminators. And I bring my Carnivore in from Strat Reserves 8 inches away from the Caladius Grav Tank to try for the rerollable charge. In my turn, I'm able to pick up the Dreadnought in the center with the Carnivore before he's able to punch into my Stalker and finish him off. I'm able to pick up the 2 remaining bikes on the right hand side. My opponent chooses to rapid ingress the 6-man Terminator brick in his own deployment zone, which is really good for me. It is threatening the left hand side expansion where my Knight Abominant is. However, Him not deep striking in my deployment zone when my home objective is something I need to keep hold of is really, really good. This Terminator brick will basically kill God, so if he wants to send it back after a Knight Abominate that is already injured, then he is more than welcome to. Into my opponent's next turn. On the right hand side here, he moves the Dreadnought down using a strat to move it through the wall into the center of the objective, threatening either of my executioners. He moves the Caladius that was in the top right hand side onto his home objective, so he's able to get line of sight into my units on the middle objective, and also still hold it, as I was able to also pick up the last remaining Sister of Silence, so nobody was holding his home objective. His 6-man unit of Terminators moves towards my Abominant and Carnivore and manages to charge them both, and the Caladius in the top left continues to stay where it is so we can get shots on the both of them. My opponent gets a little bit greedy with his shooting here. The idea here is hopefully that he can put some pot shots into the Executioner on the right hand side expansion. He can put his big guns into the Carnivore to kill it, and then my Stalker on the middle objective is on 1 wound remaining, so he's hoping to get in there and tank shock to finish me off. What ends up happening here is that the Dreadnought on the right hand side charges my Executioner. He only does about 3 damage to him, so my Executioner lives. I also still hold that point because between both the Executioners, I have about 12 OC on the point and he has only about 5. In the center here, he fails to kill my Carnivore with his big shots from the Caladius and fails to do any damage to the Executioner with his small shots. As well as when he goes in for the tank shock, he manages to do 0 mortal wounds into the Stalker, leaving him still alive on 1, and he ended up multi-charging the Carnivore as well, and so the Carnivore was actually able to pick him up entirely in combat. On the left hand side here, the Caladius Grav Tank basically shoots the Carnivore to death and does some small shot damage into the Abominant. In the charge phase, the Allarus Terminators make their charge into the Knight Abominant. They bring him down to 1 singular wound remaining. Because of the Abominant's enhancement, my opponent wasn't able to use any stratagems to give them any kind of buffs, and I was able to give my Knight Abominant the stratagem from Traitorous Lance to give me a 5-up Feel No Pain in combat. Between a combination of all that and my opponent rolling just horribly for a Custodes player, there was essentially 0 6s for his Kataz, and he was rolling a lot of 1s, which he wasn't able to re-roll. My Knight Abominant ended up living on 1 and doing a fair bit of damage back to the Terminator squad. Into my next turn, now that all my opponent's models are on the table, I don't have to worry about screening my backfield as much. So my Executioner finally makes his way out, so he can get some shots through this small bit of terrain into the Allarus Custodians that are in the big bit of terrain and within 15 inches. My Executioner on the right hand side comes in to hold the central objective, while my Stalker walks off to hold my opponent's home objective. My Executioner in the bottom right is still in combat with the Dreadnought, however, he still has 12 runes remaining, so I am not too worried about him. My Carnivore that was on the middle objective, however, moves up towards the Allarus Custodians, so you can get a charge into them. My other Carnivore that was below the left-hand side expansion objective also moves into the terrain piece to get a charge on the Allarus Custodians. My Abominant stays in combat. He shoots into combat, I believe picks up a Terminator, and between a combination of the 2 Carnivores charging in, I was able to get the Allarus squad down to just the character left. At the end of my turn, my opponent essentially has a Caladius Grav Tank, a Dreadnought, and 1 character alive. He does manage to finally finish off the Abominant in combat though, however, the game is essentially over from here. Into my opponent's turn, it's pretty simple. He shoots into combat with my Executioner on the bottom right hand side, and through the combination of combat as well, manages to kill it. He keeps his Allarus Terminator Captain in combat with the 2 Carnivores, and I am able to pick him up in my opponent's turn. The Caladius Grav Tank does some shooting into one of the Carnivores, but again, leaves him on very few wounds remaining, but still alive. Into my turn, I move away from the right hand side expansion objective, so his Dreadnought is basically left all alone. I consolidate everything towards the left hand side expansion and go up to try and finish off the Caladius Grav Tank. This is pretty much how things looked at the top of turn 5, where we essentially just call it. My opponent only has a Dreadnought left, whereas I've still got 5 War Dogs and a smattering of other smaller units, so I'm still able to score a lot of points when it comes to my turn, and my opponent has not been able to score very well at all in the previous few turns. The game ended as a 90-46 victory to me. It was an incredible game overall. It's the type of one you want to start the edition with. It was against someone I have played against before. Incredibly great guy, always a lot of fun. This game definitely didn't go his way. The dice were definitely not agreeing with him, but we both had a lot of fun, and I certainly enjoyed it for my first game of 11th. So, my takeaways from this game. Overall, take and hold feels really, really good for Knights, especially if you're taking Cultists with it. Being able to put either a super cheap body on a point that can benefit from hidden, or a massive stat check on it that can shoot out of the terrain piece feels really, really good. The cover changes seem to benefit Knights a lot. It makes our tanky chassis even more durable, helps a lot with staying alive on top of objectives, especially now that in order to be on an objective, you simultaneously have to be towed into a terrain piece and are therefore targetable. Secondaries feel pretty good as well. I never felt like there were any cards I simply wasn't able to achieve, and I really like the changes made to some of the pre-existing cards. Being able to score a big point and a small point version of most cards removes a lot of really feels bad moments in the game, as well as having an unlimited hand size for cards means that there's basically never any dead draws. You can always just hold on to it for later. Yeah, overall, 11th is fun, like really fun. It's maybe a recency bias thing, but with the changes to primary and secondary missions, the game has never felt more dynamic. If you're down by 30 points in a game, it no longer means you're basically out already, because you're able to score some absolutely massive turns if you play it correctly. And as an opponent, it means that even if you're really far ahead, you still need to be locked in on the game, because comebacks are more possible than ever. The game just feels really good to play at the moment. Being able to decide the mission that you play based on an army that you've made that is now more customizable than ever, and being able to hold unlimited secondary cards, finally creating a catch-up mechanic that doesn't completely suck. The game just feels really great, and like I mentioned, is incredibly fun to play. There's a few little things here and there that still concern me, mostly surrounding the heal rules and certain things in the game still needing FAQ'd so they actually function. However, it's mostly stuff that only the sweatiest of the sweats really care about, and I expect we'll see most of it fixed in an upcoming FAQ. However, if there's anything to take away from this video, essentially, if you enjoyed playing Warhammer in 10th edition, you're going to love 11th. Like I mentioned, they've removed so many feels bads from the games. You're almost never out of a game, no matter how many points down you are, no matter how bad you think your board position is, a game is always going on for all 5 rounds. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. Leave a comment down below, let me know if you've played any 11th edition so far, particularly have you tried Knights at all on any of the maps? Have you tried a different disposition to me? You know, Purge the Foe, Priority Assets, I want to try all of them essentially at some point, so if you've played one other than Taken Hold, please do let me know how that went for you. I want to iterate on this list a little bit for my next couple of games. I would like to try the Purge the Foe disposition, mainly because you can get it from Traitorous Lance. So I want to try a thing with double Abominants, a Lancer, and then a handful of War Dogs with some Cultists. I think that could be really fun, but maybe you'll hear about that in my next video. But yeah, I really appreciate you watching, listening to me ramble on about 11th edition. I hope you've all been enjoying it. I've got a few more games lined up, so you'll be hearing from me again about how 11th is going for me. That's all for now though, so I will see you in the next one. Goodbye!